Millionaire man rejects humble girl, unaware she's his daughter lost 20 years ago. In this gripping tale of fate and family, a wealthy businessman unknowingly crosses paths with a young woman he abandoned 2 decades ago. This emotional story unfolds as the millionaire, known for his success and opulent lifestyle, encounters a humble girl in a twist of destiny. Unaware of their profound connection, he dismisses her, oblivious to the fact that she is his long-lost daughter.
Ethan Grayson stood amidst the grandeur of his lavish mansion, surrounded by the city's elite. As a self-made billionaire, Ethan was known for his icy demeanor and ruthless ambition. Tonight, he hosted one of his infamous galas, an evening where the powerful gathered to discuss influence, wealth, and control. To Ethan, these parties served only one purpose: reinforcing his position. He moved through the crowd, detached, rarely showing emotion, knowing that in his world, sentiment was a weakness. He was respected, even feared, but loneliness clung to him like a shadow. Midway through the evening, Ethan's attention was drawn to a young waitress who accidentally brushed against him, spilling wine on his tailored suit. The girl's face turned pale as she stammered an apology, but Ethan's reaction was swift and cold. "Watch where you're going," he snapped, his tone sharp and condescending. Heads turned, and a silence fell over the nearby crowd. The girl's eyes dropped to the floor, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. She mumbled another apology, but Ethan waved her off dismissively, irritated by the minor inconvenience. The young waitress, Lila, felt the sting of his words long after she walked away. Though she was used to the occasional rude customer, this encounter felt different. Something about the man unsettled her, not only because of his sharp words, but because his face seemed oddly familiar. She couldn't quite place why his cold, piercing gaze affected her so deeply. Pushing the thought aside, she returned to her work, resolving to avoid his presence for the rest of the evening. However, the encounter left a strange, lingering discomfort she couldn't shake. As the evening drew to a close, Ethan's mind returned to the moment, surprised at how much the small interaction had rattled him. He thought back to his youth, a time when his life had been simpler, driven more by passion than ambition. Memories of Emily, his first love, surfaced unexpectedly. They had been inseparable once, dreaming of a life filled with love and laughter. But he had left her, choosing his career over their relationship. His choice had haunted him ever since, though he buried it deep beneath his cold exterior. Ethan had long convinced himself that his decision to leave Emily had been necessary for his success. Yet, from time to time, he wondered what might have been if he'd stayed with her. Emily had been different from anyone he'd known, kind, free-spirited, and fiercely loyal. But loyalty and kindness had no place in the world he aimed to conquer. Even so, her memory lingered, resurfacing now and then, reminding him of the life he could never reclaim. He told himself he had no regrets, but the truth was harder to admit. Meanwhile, Lila couldn't shake the feeling of familiarity that haunted her after meeting Ethan. She had never known her father, her mother having passed when she was still a teenager, leaving her alone to fend for herself. Her mother, Emily, had once mentioned that Lila's father was a man of ambition who left before she was born. Lila had stopped wondering about him years ago, convinced that a man who would abandon his family had no place in her life. Still, something in Ethan's gaze reminded her of things she didn't fully understand. That night, as Lila lay in bed, memories of her mother surfaced. Emily had been strong, a woman who faced every challenge with courage, despite the struggles they endured. They had moved from place to place, and Lila never understood why her mother refused to speak about the past. There were nights Lila had seen her mother staring out the window, lost in thought, as if she longed for something, or someone, she'd left behind. As a child, Lila had asked about her father, but her mother's pained silence was all the answer she received. Ethan, too, found his mind drifting to Emily that night, wondering what had become of her. He had assumed she moved on, perhaps even built a family of her own, but a part of him wondered if she ever thought of him. He was a different man now, hardened by years of business, wealth, and power. Feelings like love and regret seemed weak, impractical for the life he had chosen. Yet, as he thought of Emily, he felt a twinge of something long buried, a sense of loss for the love he had abandoned so long ago. Neither Lila nor Ethan could know that fate was setting the stage for a reunion. Their paths had crossed briefly, sparking memories of a past long forgotten, though neither understood why. Each was haunted by questions of identity and choices, unaware of the shared blood between them. For Lila, the night was a fleeting encounter with a stranger who seemed familiar. For Ethan, it was a painful reminder of the life he had forsaken. But their connection, hidden beneath years of secrets, was bound to resurface. As the night wore on, both lay awake, lost in thoughts of things past and present. Lila tried to dismiss the strange pull she felt, focusing on her responsibilities and dreams. Ethan, on the other hand, pushed the memories of Emily aside, returning to his steely resolve. Neither realized that their lives were intertwined, destined to collide again, revealing truths neither was prepared to face. Soon, they would both come to understand that the past has a way of catching up, no matter how deeply one tries to bury it. The next morning, Lila woke with a sense of unease lingering from the night before. As she went about her day, she couldn't shake the memory of Ethan Grayson's face or the strange sense of recognition that had gripped her. Working as a waitress was tough, and she was used to dealing with difficult customers, but this was different. It was as though something in his eyes had stirred memories she didn't know she had. She tried to brush it off as coincidence, but the feeling was hard to ignore. Her life had been one of unanswered questions, and this was just another mystery. Over coffee, Lila spoke with her best friend, Maggie, about the gala and the man who had so rudely dismissed her. Maggie listened, intrigued, as Lila described the nagging feeling that Ethan seemed familiar. Laughing, Maggie teased her, suggesting that maybe he was her long-lost father. Lila rolled her eyes, dismissing the idea. The only thing she knew about her father was that he had left before she was born, choosing his career over family. She had made peace with that long ago, or so she thought. Despite her efforts to move on, Lila's mind kept returning to her mother, Emily. When she was a child, she had often seen Emily lost in thought, a distant sadness clouding her expression. Lila remembered asking about her father once, only to be met with silence. Her mother had simply told her that he was a man with big dreams, who'd chosen a different path. Lila had learned early not to ask too many questions, but the ache of not knowing lingered. Her mother had passed when Lila was just 16, leaving her with more questions than answers. Ethan, meanwhile, resumed his daily routine, attempting to brush aside the unsettling feelings from the previous night. He was a man of discipline, focused on his work and dismissive of distractions. Still, thoughts of Emily crept in, stirring memories he had long buried. He remembered their last days together, how she had pleaded with him to choose love over ambition. At the time, his hunger for success had overridden every other emotion. Now, with years of distance, he wondered if he had made the right choice, though he quickly forced the thought away. As he sat in his office, his mind drifted back to the young waitress from the gala. There was something in her face, a resemblance that unsettled him, though he couldn't pinpoint why. Her eyes, her expression, they stirred a familiarity that tugged at him. Ethan dismissed it as an overreaction, convincing himself it was simply a trick of his mind. His life was structured, controlled, and he had no space for idle speculation. But as he worked, he found himself distracted, the memory of her haunting him in a way he didn't understand. Lila decided to investigate her mother's belongings that evening, hoping to find a clue to her past. She hadn't opened the box since her mother's death, fearing the memories it would bring. With a deep breath, she sifted through old photos, letters, and keepsakes. One photo caught her eye, her mother young and vibrant, with a man she didn't recognize. His face was partially obscured, but there was something familiar in his stance, his presence. Lila's heart raced as she wondered if this mystery man could be her father, the missing piece of her life's puzzle. Ethan's own curiosity got the better of him, and he called an old friend, one of the few who knew about his past with Emily. He asked if his friend had any news of her, though he expected nothing. His friend hesitated before revealing that Emily had passed years ago but had raised a daughter alone. Ethan's heart froze, the reality of what he'd lost hitting him all at once. He hadn't known he had a child. The idea that he had abandoned not only Emily but also a daughter shook him deeply, stirring emotions he'd long suppressed. The revelation left Ethan in a state of shock, grappling with a mix of guilt and disbelief. The daughter he never knew existed was out there, living a life without him, possibly resenting him. He wondered what kind of life she'd had and whether she knew about him. The weight of his choices pressed down on him as he realized the consequences of his ambition. He had gained wealth and power, but at what cost? For the first time in years, he felt truly vulnerable, facing the possibility that his choices had hurt others. Lila stared at the photograph, her thoughts racing as she wondered who this man was and why her mother had kept him a secret. There was a part of her that wanted to know more, to fill in the gaps that had haunted her for so long. But another part feared the truth, afraid it would bring only pain. She decided that she had to find answers, no matter the cost. Little did she know, her search would lead her back to Ethan Grayson, the very man who had dismissed her so coldly, and the man who unknowingly shared her blood. Lila couldn't shake the image of the man in the photograph she found among her mother's things. His face, though partially obscured, hinted at someone important to her mother's past, and possibly to her own. Over the next few days, she found herself returning to the photo, studying the vague features and wondering who he might be. She realized that finding him might bring her closer to understanding why her mother had been so secretive. But the idea of tracing someone from a single decades-old photo seemed daunting. Determined to learn more, Lila visited an old family friend, Mrs. Thompson, who had known her mother well. Mrs. Thompson welcomed her warmly and listened intently as Lila shared her discovery of the photograph. The older woman sighed, her face tinged with sadness, and hinted that there had been someone her mother had loved deeply but had to let go. She warned Lila that the past was painful, and sometimes uncovering it could bring more sorrow than peace. But Lila, more curious than ever, pressed her, hoping for even a small detail. After some hesitation, Mrs. Thompson revealed that the man in the photo was named Ethan, a name that sent a jolt through Lila as she remembered the man from the gala. Could it be the same Ethan? Mrs. Thompson told her that Ethan had been the love of her mother's life, but his ambitions had led him away, leaving Emily to raise Lila alone. Hearing this, Lila felt a mixture of anger and sadness, realizing the man she met at the gala might have abandoned her and her mother for a life of wealth and power. Meanwhile, Ethan couldn't focus on his work, consumed by thoughts of the daughter he'd never known. He felt a deep sense of guilt and wondered if she resented him for his absence. Memories of Emily resurfaced, filling him with regret for the life he'd left behind. He decided he had to find his daughter and learn more about the life she had led. Despite his fear of rejection, he was determined to make amends if he could. For the first time, his money and power felt meaningless. They couldn't repair the years he had missed. Driven by guilt, Ethan hired a private investigator to search for his daughter, hoping to uncover any information that could lead him to her. The investigator's report came back with a name, Lila Thompson. The realization stunned him. Lila was the young woman he had dismissed so coldly at the gala. Shocked, he replayed their encounter in his mind, feeling a surge of shame at how he had treated her. He had been so close, and yet he hadn't known. Now, he was determined to make things right, no matter the cost. Lila, unaware of Ethan's discovery, felt conflicted about her next steps. Part of her wanted to confront him, to demand answers about why he had abandoned her and her mother. But another part of her feared that meeting him would only bring pain. She spent hours contemplating her choices, feeling a mix of anger and longing for the father she had never known. The mystery of who he was and why he had left her mother haunted her, pushing her toward a decision she knew would change her life forever. Unable to bear the questions any longer, Lila decided to track down Ethan Grayson herself. She gathered her courage and arrived at his office building, unsure of what to expect. She approached the receptionist, asking to meet with Ethan, her heart pounding as she rehearsed the words she would say. The receptionist glanced at her curiously, but informed her that Mr. Grayson was not accepting visitors. Disheartened, Lila left, but she wasn't ready to give up just yet. She would find another way. Ethan, unaware of Lila's visit, wrestled with how to approach her. He wanted to explain himself, to tell her everything about his love for Emily and the regret he felt for leaving. But he feared that his words wouldn't be enough. He knew he couldn't undo the years of absence, the lost time that had scarred them both. For a man who had always been in control, the uncertainty terrified him. But he was determined to try, even if it meant facing the rejection he feared most. That evening, Lila received a letter. It was from Ethan, who had found her address through his investigator. He wrote that he wanted to meet her and explain the choices he had made, hoping she would give him a chance to tell his side of the story. Lila's hand shook as she read his words, feeling a whirlwind of emotions: anger, curiosity, and a strange sense of hope. She wasn't sure she could forgive him, but she knew she needed answers. With a deep breath, she decided to accept his invitation, setting the stage for a reunion that would change them both. Lila arrived at the upscale cafe where she'd agreed to meet Ethan, her heart pounding with anticipation and nerves. She spotted him instantly. His presence commanded the room, even in a casual setting. Taking a deep breath, she walked toward him, determined to keep her emotions in check. As she approached, Ethan looked up, his usually stern face softening with something that resembled vulnerability. They greeted each other awkwardly, neither sure of how to begin. For a moment, there was only silence, thick with the weight of unspoken words. Ethan cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable but resolute. He began by apologizing for how he had treated her at the gala, explaining that he had no idea who she was. His words were careful, and his gaze never left her face, as if he feared she might vanish. Lila listened, expression unreadable, though his apology didn't erase years of absence. When he finished, she responded with a quiet "thank you," but her tone was guarded. She wasn't ready to forgive, not yet, and Ethan could sense it. Lila broke the silence by asking the question that had haunted her: "Why did you leave us?" Ethan sighed deeply, realizing he owed her the full truth. He explained how he and her mother had loved each other deeply but were torn apart by his ambitions and family pressures. He confessed that he had chosen his career over family, a choice he regretted more each day. Lila's expression remained stoic as she absorbed his words. She had always suspected he'd left for selfish reasons, but hearing it from him made it more painful. As Ethan continued, he told her about the regret that had shadowed his life since leaving Emily. He admitted that he'd been too proud, too focused on his own success to return, even when he missed her. "I thought I could bury the past," he said quietly. "But it was always there." His voice wavered slightly, a rare break in his usually controlled demeanor. Lila saw the cracks in his composure, yet she still struggled to reconcile the man before her with the father she had never known. Feeling a mixture of anger and sadness, Lila asked if he had ever tried to find them. Ethan hesitated, knowing this question would reveal the depth of his failures. He admitted that he had been afraid that Emily had moved on, that she wouldn't forgive him, and later, that he couldn't face the daughter he had left behind. His cowardice, he confessed, had kept him from seeking them out. Lila felt a pang of sympathy but quickly pushed it aside, unwilling to let his pain soften her resolve. After a long pause, Lila shared her side of the story, telling Ethan about her life with her mother. She spoke of the hardships they had faced, moving from place to place and struggling to make ends meet. She told him about her mother's strength and resilience, how Emily had been both mother and father to her. Ethan listened, each word filling him with guilt and regret. He realized how much he had missed, not just as a father but as a man who had once loved Emily deeply. Lila's voice wavered as she described her mother's passing and the sense of loneliness that had followed. She had been only 16, forced to fend for herself in a world that felt cold and indifferent. As she spoke, Ethan felt a surge of emotions: guilt, sadness, and a fierce desire to make up for the lost years. But he knew that no apology or gesture could bring back the time they had lost. All he could do was offer her the support he should have given years ago. Ethan reached out, his voice softening as he said, "I can't change the past, but if you'll let me, I want to be here for you now." His offer was genuine, and for the first time, Lila saw a glimpse of the man her mother might have fallen in love with. Part of her wanted to accept, to let herself believe he could be the father she'd always needed. But another part was still hesitant, wary of opening her heart to someone who had already hurt her so deeply. They sat in silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Lila knew that forgiving him would be a long process, but something inside her had softened slightly. She looked at him and gave a small nod, indicating she was willing to try. Ethan's face reflected both relief and gratitude. For the first time, they shared a connection, a fragile thread of understanding that hinted at the possibility of a future, however uncertain, as father and daughter. As they parted ways, Lila felt a strange mix of emotions, anger, sadness, but also a glimmer of hope. She had come searching for answers and had found them, though they weren't easy to accept. Ethan walked away feeling both relieved and burdened, knowing he still had much to prove. Their journey was just beginning, a tentative first step toward healing the wounds of the past and discovering what family could mean in the present. In the days following their meeting, Lila found herself replaying the conversation in her mind, grappling with emotions that felt too tangled to sort. She had finally met her father, but instead of feeling the closure she'd expected, she felt torn between resentment and hope. She shared her mixed feelings with Maggie, who encouraged her to give Ethan a chance. Maggie reminded her that people could change, even if it took time. Lila was hesitant, but agreed to keep an open mind. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but part of her wanted to believe he could become a part of her life. Meanwhile, Ethan was determined to make amends. He found himself thinking about Lila constantly, about the years she had lived without him and all the moments he had missed. He wanted to help her in any way he could, but he knew that earning her trust would be a gradual process. He reached out to her, suggesting they meet again, perhaps in a less formal setting. Lila agreed, though her nerves were evident. This time, they chose a park, hoping the fresh air would ease the tension between them. Their second meeting was awkward but less tense than the first. They walked side by side, exchanging small talk that felt strange, considering their connection. Ethan asked Lila about her job and her interests, wanting to learn as much as he could. She spoke cautiously, offering glimpses into her life without giving too much away. She told him about her love for photography, a passion that had been her solace through difficult times. Ethan listened intently, surprised and impressed by her resilience and independence. As they talked, Ethan began to see flashes of Emily in Lila, the way she laughed, the spark in her eyes when she spoke about things she cared about. It reminded him of the woman he had once loved, and he felt a pang of regret for all he had lost. But he reminded himself that this wasn't about him. It was about making things right for Lila, giving her the support she had been denied for so long. For the first time in years, he felt a purpose beyond his career and wealth, a desire to be someone she could rely on. Gradually, their meetings became more frequent, with each one revealing a new layer of their relationship. Ethan invited her to lunch one weekend, where they shared stories from their pasts, learning more about each other's worlds. Lila told him about her mother's strength, about the values she'd instilled in her. Ethan listened with a mixture of admiration and shame, realizing how much Emily had sacrificed to raise their daughter alone. He felt a newfound respect for Emily, even as he mourned the chance to have been there himself. Over time, Lila began to see that Ethan was genuinely trying to connect with her. Though her trust wasn't fully restored, she appreciated his efforts to be present in her life. He had started calling her regularly, checking in on her and offering support in small ways. She found herself opening up to him, bit by bit, sharing stories she had kept to herself for years. Each conversation brought them a little closer, bridging the gap that years of separation had created. Still, she remained cautious, guarding her heart from disappointment. One day, Ethan surprised Lila by giving her a camera, a high-quality model he had picked out himself. She was taken aback, unsure whether to accept it. He explained that he wanted to support her passion for photography, to give her the tools she needed to pursue it fully. Lila hesitated but saw the sincerity in his eyes. Reluctantly, she accepted the gift, her emotions a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. She wasn't used to such gestures from him, and the unfamiliar feeling of having someone care for her felt both comforting and strange. As weeks passed, Lila started to realize how much she had wanted a father figure in her life, even if she'd convinced herself otherwise. She still felt hurt by Ethan's absence, but she couldn't deny the relief of having him around. He was awkward, often unsure of how to act, but his dedication was clear. Slowly, she allowed herself to enjoy their moments together, even if the past still lingered. There was a cautious hope growing within her, a possibility that they could build something real. Ethan, too, felt himself changing. For years, he had lived a life focused on success, convinced that love and family were distractions. But now, being with Lila, he felt a deep sense of purpose and connection that no amount of money could replace. He found himself looking forward to their meetings, grateful for every moment they shared. He knew he couldn't erase the past, but he was determined to make up for lost time. Together, they were slowly creating a new chapter, one built on honesty, forgiveness, and the hope of becoming a true family. As the days turned into weeks, Lila found herself accepting Ethan's presence in her life more comfortably. It wasn't easy. There were moments when the old wounds resurfaced, and the weight of abandonment felt too heavy to bear. But with each passing day, she noticed a shift in herself. She was learning to trust him again, one small gesture at a time. Ethan's efforts didn't go unnoticed. He was there for her when she needed him, never pushing too hard but always showing up. One afternoon, as they sat in a quiet cafe, Lila asked Ethan more about his past, about his family, his rise to success, and the choices that had led him to the man he was today. He shared stories of his childhood, how his parents had always expected him to excel, pushing him toward a future he had never truly chosen. As he spoke, Lila realized that he, too, had been shaped by pressures and expectations, much like her mother. His ambition, his drive for success, these weren't just personal flaws, but reflections of a world that had never allowed him to slow down and question his desires. As they spoke, Lila couldn't help but wonder if her mother had ever asked him to choose between her and his dreams. She realized that she had never fully understood the complexity of the choices Emily had made, how she had fought for their family, but how Ethan had fought for a future that had kept him away. It wasn't an excuse, but it helped her see him differently. He wasn't just the man who had abandoned them. He was a product of his own struggles and fears. This new perspective didn't erase the hurt, but it made it easier to accept. Ethan, too, was learning more about Lila with each conversation. He was beginning to understand how deeply her past had affected her. The walls she had built around herself, the guarded way she spoke about her childhood, it all made sense now. She had learned to survive without him, and he knew it would take more than just words to prove he was worthy of her trust. He was starting to realize the depth of the loss they had both experienced, and how much work it would take to heal the wounds he had caused. One evening, as they walked through the park near Lila's apartment, the conversation turned to more personal territory. Lila hesitated before bringing up the subject of her mother, knowing that it was still a raw topic for both of them. What was she like? Lila asked quietly. Ethan stopped walking, his expression softening as he thought about the woman he had loved. He told her that Emily had been strong and fiercely independent, someone who had always put others first, even when it meant sacrificing her own dreams. His voice trembled slightly, betraying the deep regret he still carried. Hearing this, Lila felt a surge of emotion. She had always known her mother was strong, but hearing Ethan's perspective added a new layer of understanding. For the first time, she realized that Emily had made sacrifices not just for her, but for him too. The complexity of their relationship was becoming clearer, and the more she learned, the less she felt like a victim and more like someone trying to make sense of a tangled past. There was pain, yes, but there was also a deep sense of respect for the woman who had fought for everything they had. Lila's relationship with Ethan continued to evolve, though it was far from perfect. There were days when the anger still crept up, when the hurt felt too fresh to ignore. But there were also moments of connection, like when they spent hours talking about the places they wanted to visit, or when Ethan surprised her with tickets to an art exhibit she had been dying to see. These small gestures meant more to Lila than she could express. She wasn't ready to forgive him completely, but she was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could have a future together. As for Ethan, he was more determined than ever to make things right. He found himself seeking advice from friends who had grown up with him, asking them how to build a relationship with a daughter he had never known. They didn't have all the answers, but their support reminded him that he wasn't alone in this. The desire to be a better father, to truly show Lila that he cared, had become the driving force in his life. His business ventures no longer felt as important, and his relationships with colleagues seemed shallow in comparison to the bond he was trying to rebuild with his daughter. Lila's heart, though still scarred, was slowly opening up. The fear of rejection that had once held her back was lessening, and she found herself trusting Ethan more each day. There were still moments when she questioned whether she could ever fully forgive him, but she had learned that forgiveness wasn't a destination, it was a journey. And perhaps, just perhaps, that journey would lead her to a future with the father she had always wanted but never thought she could have. As the weeks passed, Lila and Ethan grew more accustomed to their new dynamic. Their relationship, once fractured and full of hesitation, was slowly transforming into something more steady. But with this newfound connection came deeper questions about the past, and about how far they were both willing to go to heal. Lila, though still unsure of her feelings toward Ethan, found herself leaning on him more often. Whether it was for advice or just a listening ear, his presence in her life began to feel less like a reminder of abandonment and more like a source of support. One evening, after a particularly difficult week at work, Lila found herself at Ethan's office, seeking comfort. She had never been one to ask for help, but something about their evolving relationship made it easier. Ethan was surprised to see her, but when he saw the exhaustion in her eyes, he immediately offered her a seat. They talked for hours, about her work struggles, about the guilt she carried for not feeling more successful, and about her constant battle to prove herself. Ethan listened, his heart aching for the daughter he had barely known. He offered her words of encouragement, telling her that success wasn't about meeting others' expectations, but about finding peace with herself. Lila appreciated his words, but part of her still wasn't sure if she could fully trust his advice. She had spent years convincing herself that she didn't need anyone, that relying on others only led to disappointment. But the more she listened to Ethan, the more she realized he was trying to be the father she had missed. Even if she couldn't forgive him for all the lost years, she could see the effort he was putting into being there for her now. It was a step, small but significant, in a direction she hadn't thought possible. Ethan, for his part, was struggling with his own demons. The more he got to know Lila, the more he realized just how much he had missed. He had spent so many years in pursuit of wealth and status, thinking that those things would bring him fulfillment. But now, as he looked at Lila, someone who had endured so much without him, he understood that what he truly needed was to build a relationship with her, not just a bond based on guilt. Yet, even with this realization, he couldn't shake the fear that he had already done too much damage to repair. Despite his doubts, Ethan continued to make efforts to show Lila that he was committed to their relationship. One weekend, he invited her to a family event, hoping it would give her a glimpse into his world. Lila was hesitant at first. She wasn't sure she was ready to dive into his life, with all its wealth and expectations. But Ethan reassured her that there would be no pressure, that she didn't have to be anyone but herself. Reluctantly, Lila agreed, though she couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider in a world she didn't belong to. When they arrived at the event, Lila felt immediately out of place. The guests, dressed in their elegant attire, spoke about business deals and extravagant vacations. Ethan introduced her as his daughter, and though the words came easily to him, Lila couldn't help but feel the weight of them. It wasn't just the wealth that made her uncomfortable, it was the realization that Ethan had lived a life she hadn't been a part of. As she navigated through the crowd, she saw how easily he fit in, how familiar the world seemed to him. She felt a sharp pang of loneliness, a reminder of everything she had missed. Ethan noticed the discomfort in Lila's eyes. He tried to engage her in conversation, but she seemed distant, lost in thought. He understood why she felt that way. He had introduced her to a world she wasn't ready for, a world he had chosen over her all those years ago. Still, he couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope when Lila looked at him, not with anger, but with a quiet acceptance. Perhaps this too was part of the process, learning to be a family in a new and unfamiliar way. Later that evening, as they left the event, Lila remained silent. Ethan tried to make light conversation, but she remained withdrawn. It wasn't anger she felt, it was confusion. She had wanted to fit in, to understand this new version of her father, but it felt like too much too soon. It wasn't the world she had built for herself, and the divide between her life and his suddenly felt wider than ever. As they drove home, Ethan could sense her internal struggle, but knew that pushing her would only create more distance. He decided to give her space, understanding that healing wouldn't happen overnight. That night, Lila lay in bed, turning the events of the evening over in her mind. She wasn't sure what she had expected, but the reality of the situation had felt like a stark reminder of how different their worlds were. She thought of her mother, how Emily had always managed to keep her grounded, away from the glittering distractions that had consumed Ethan. And yet, Lila knew that her mother had also wanted the best for her, which was why she had never resented the idea of Ethan being a part of her life. Maybe it was time for Lila to stop seeing herself as separate from Ethan's world. Maybe it was time to figure out what being part of his life really meant. As the days passed, Lila began to reflect on her relationship with Ethan more deeply. The discomfort of that night hadn't faded, but she realized that she wasn't just struggling with his world, she was struggling with her own fears about letting him in. She had spent so many years building walls to protect herself that allowing anyone in, even someone who wanted to make amends, felt impossible. Yet, she knew that if she ever wanted a chance at healing, she couldn't keep living in isolation. It was time to face her fears, and maybe even take the next step in rebuilding the relationship with her father. The weeks that followed the uncomfortable family event were a period of reflection for both Lila and Ethan. Though they had made progress, the road ahead still felt uncertain. Lila continued to wrestle with her emotions, torn between the desire to accept Ethan and the fear of being hurt again. She felt as if she were standing on the edge of something, unsure whether to take the leap or retreat back into the safety of her familiar solitary life. Ethan, too, grappled with his own doubts. He knew that Lila's forgiveness couldn't be rushed, and that the years he had lost could never be fully made up. One afternoon, after several days of silence, Lila received a message from Ethan. It was simple, just a reminder that he was there for her, but it struck a chord. She had spent so much time pushing him away, convinced that he would never understand her, that she hadn't stopped to consider how much he had changed. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to let go of the past and see him for the person he was now, not the man who had abandoned her years ago. With a sigh, Lila decided to meet him at a small cafe they had visited before, a place that held no memories of wealth or status, just the chance for a quiet conversation between two people trying to rebuild a connection. Ethan was already there when Lila arrived, his posture relaxed but his eyes filled with anticipation. He stood up when he saw her, offering a small smile that felt both nervous and hopeful. They sat down across from each other, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. It was as if they were both waiting for the right words to break the silence. Finally, Lila took a deep breath and spoke. "I've been thinking a lot," she said, her voice steady but soft. "About everything. About you. About us." Ethan listened intently, his heart racing. "I'm ready to hear whatever you have to say," he replied quietly. He knew this was the moment when Lila might either accept him as the father she needed or push him away for good. His hope, fragile as it was, rested on her willingness to meet him halfway. He didn't expect immediate forgiveness, but he hoped for the possibility of a new beginning. Lila paused for a moment before continuing. "I've spent so long angry with you. I think part of me still is," she admitted, her eyes briefly meeting his. "But I've also spent a lot of time thinking about what it would be like to have a father. Not the man I thought you were, but the man you've become." She took a shaky breath, fighting back the emotions that threatened to surface. "It's hard for me, but I'm willing to try. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I want to see if we can start over." Ethan's chest tightened at her words. For the first time, he felt as if they were standing on the same ground, facing the same challenges. The walls Lila had built over the years weren't gone, but she was giving him the chance to tear them down, brick by brick. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to make up for the years I missed, but I'm here now. I'm here for you, however long it takes." Lila nodded slowly, still uncertain but relieved to hear the sincerity in his voice. She had spent so much time resenting him for his past mistakes, but now she was beginning to see the possibility of a future. A future where forgiveness wasn't about erasing the past, but about learning to move forward together. "I think I've spent too long carrying the weight of everything," Lila said, her voice softer now. "Maybe it's time to let go and see where we can go from here." The conversation drifted to lighter topics after that, and for the first time in years, they found themselves laughing, about nothing in particular, but about the simple joy of being together. Lila felt a sense of warmth that had been absent for so long, and though it was a tentative beginning, it felt real. It felt like the start of something new. As they parted ways that afternoon, Ethan felt a sense of peace that had eluded him for years. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain: Lila had given him the chance to prove that he could be the father she needed, that he could be a part of her life in a meaningful way. It wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, Ethan believed it was possible. Lila, too, felt the weight of a new chapter beginning. There were still questions in her heart, and the pain of the past wasn't gone, but she no longer felt trapped by it. With each passing day, she realized that healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant allowing room for something better, something different. She didn't have to forgive everything overnight, but she could start fresh. And that was enough. The road ahead would be long and filled with challenges, but for the first time in years, both Lila and Ethan felt the hope of a future where they could finally be the family they had always longed to be. And in that moment, that was all that mattered.
This narrative prompts reflection on the value of humility and open-mindedness. How often do we dismiss or undervalue people without understanding their stories? It's a stark lesson in treating everyone with respect and kindness, as our actions today can ripple into consequences we never foresee. The story is a poignant call to cherish relationships and to never let pride overshadow love and compassion.